been more than 3 years since our last in-person gathering of this U.S. Japan related organizations summit. And in that time, a lot happened, and we'll talk about some of that. But in that time, none of us, regardless of the organization that we represent, the location where we live and work, stopped our work dedicated to supporting a very important bilateral relationship, the U.S. Japan relationship. And we've done it in a variety of ways. And you all have kindly responded to my colleague, Pamela Fields, and shared your updates. So you should all have an electronic version that was circulated by email. If you did not receive it, please let Pamela know and we'll make sure that you do. But it's pretty darn impressive to see the robustness of this ecosystem of organizations that are supporting a bilateral relationship in such a variety of ways. So today, we're going to be gathered for another hour and 10 minutes or so to check in with each other, reintroduce ourselves to each other, and then afterwards at about 12:15, we'll take a break. So those of us who are physically in this beautiful space will be able to have a chance to have a lunch and just to catch up with each other and continue the conversations that I interrupted. But before doing that, I want to just say, officially wearing my CULCON hat, welcome, and thank you to our hosts at IIE, Alan Goodman. Thank you so much for being here. Peggy Blumenthal, you always kindly say yes, even without knowing the date. I'm always amazed at how many people are willing to gather here in Washington, D.C. in August. And it just shows the dedication of all of us and all of you to this important work that we do. But IIE is in new space. I was a little nervous that people might show up at the other address, but I think all of you read Pamela's communication very carefully. And I think we would all agree, as awesome and wonderful as your previous space was, this is pretty amazing. I mean, it's open, it's airy, it's high tech. I know that there are a few technical things that are still going to be even better, but from where we sit, I think it's pretty comfortable and amazing. So thank you for the hospitality and thank you for the ongoing support. I also want to just thank not only all of you who are in the room and on screen, but our CULCON panelists in particular. We have on screen Trevor Dawes, who's joining us. Well, he's affiliated with the University of Delaware, but Trevor travels so much, for all I know, he's in Europe. But welcome, Trevor. And Trevor is the chair of one of our subcommittees on information access and information sharing. And we also, oh good, have Cynthia Tiente Madsen, who's the president of San Jose State University in California. Look at that background. Don't we all want to have our next meeting there? And in person, we have
anytime.
Okay. In person, we have Dr. Bill Tsutsui, who you'll hear from a little bit later, who's the co-chair of our working group on subnational diplomacy. And we also have our representatives from the Department of State, from ECA and EAP. We've got Allison, I keep wanting to say Sloan, it's Coyne, and Tim Marshall. And maybe someone from the Department of Education is expected. So we've got CULCON well represented. We've got at least maybe 30 organizations well represented. I won't take the time to introduce each one of you, but a participants list has been distributed, as well as the updates of your institutional work and activities. You have name tags for purposes of this meeting. If you'd like to contribute and comment on something, just lift your name tag and we'll acknowledge you. If you're on screen, please use the raise hand feature. We'll be able to see that you have something to share. The other housekeeping item is that there are restrooms in this space that do not require a key. You just have to wave in front. And they're on the other side. The women's is here and the men's is a little bit further down. There's not a built-in break, so feel free to take your own coffee or water break. And with that, I'm going to ask Alan if he would offer us a few comments by way of welcome or whatever you'd like to share that this community should know. I read in your summary that you guys have been busy producing a lot of research, studies, and et cetera. So if you have highlights from that, we'd be interested in hearing them now. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much. I don't want to interrupt the honors. I'm having some vision problems, so I have to look and see, so I'm going.
There you go.
I brought just the summary of numbers of where Japan fits in the world of open doors and international educational exchange that we track. I want to assure Pam that if any of you showed up in 1400K, I did that for 3 months. Even parked in the garage and then realized, well, that's not my building anymore. So it takes a while to get used to it.
Excuse me, it's very difficult to hear.
The mic is right there, so maybe just step a little closer to it. There you go.
Is this any better?
Yes,
Thank you,
And
Cynthia.
if I turn my back to the screen, is it
that's okay.
Okay.
I think hearing is better.
So just 3 things from the numbers that are not in what I've just handed out or in our summary in your meeting materials. There are about 6.5 million internationally mobile students in the world today. I think, and we'll be doing some research in the fall and next year, that the number is more likely to be 10 million by 2030. So there will be almost a doubling of internationally mobile students. What hasn't changed is that there are 10 countries where 80% of the internationally mobile students go. And Japan is in the top 10. So is America, so is Canada, India. There's a question mark about China. Russia has been in the top 10. I don't think they will be in the top 10 any longer, but Japan in our world of international exchange tracking numbers remains very important. And I think will increasingly be important as its foreign policy seeks to double the number of international students that it presently has. And we'll all watch that very carefully. I'm delighted that our summary mentions the new Quad fellowships, which will continue on for another year or 2. So stay tuned for the announcements on that. We've had a very strong field from Japan and very strong 25 finalists who were awarded among the 100 of the Quad, those fellowships. So, what's not there, and it's probably not entirely Japan related, though universities in Kyoto and Okinawa have helped us. Our new initiative is called the Odyssey Scholarships. It's a program that we're trying to raise $100 million to endow. We're about a quarter of the way there as we speak. To give 100 scholarships, graduate and undergraduate, every year for the entire course of their degree, only to refugee and displaced students. If you think about the world in which we work, Fulbright, for example, which we have the privilege of administering on behalf of the Department of State, you really can't be a refugee and have a Fulbright, because you've got to be in Yemen, you've got to be in Syria, you've got to be in the country of your citizenship, and we've got to have an embassy. And I also chair the Rhodes Scholarships for the Middle East in their selection committees. Done that for about 7 years now. A lot of refugees and displaced students in the Middle East. We've never had a Rhodes nomination because people say, well, they don't have papers, they don't have a passport, they couldn't get a visa to go to the United Kingdom, they can't travel. If they do somehow travel, maybe they can never come back. And so a couple of years ago, I realized with the team in our space, the world of refugee and displaced students is not accounted for. So Odyssey is a chance and an attempt to do that. We had 6,500 applications and nominations for the first 100 fellowships last year. We were able to make 84 awards. And the way we get around visas and passports is we'll find you a place at a university near where you are. We did 2 pilot programs, one in Jordan, one in northern Thailand for refugees from Burma. That was fabulously successful. Nobody needed papers, nobody needed traveling documents. And when the students finished the pilot project, they went back to their home communities with public health degrees or planning degrees, things that are useful to the communities where they are. So we're not drawing refugees away with the view that they will live apart from their communities in another society. When we started planning for this, there were 65 million refugees in the world. There are now 114 million. All the estimates, we don't need another war with Ukraine and Russia, but all the estimates are that within the next decade, there will be over 200 million refugees. And lo and behold, there are a lot of 18 to 24-year-olds that went to high school in the refugee camp. They're ready to go to college, but there's nothing for them. And Odyssey is an attempt to address that. Japan has responded both in principle with support and also with some placements in Kyoto and Okinawa. So with that, welcome to IIE. I'd like to ask my partner in crime, Peggy Blumenthal, if I think this may be your first visit to the office here.
I'm so glad we hosted you because I got to come down and see the new office. I just want to say one word about the sheet that we passed out because there's something that if you look in the lower right, the good news is that students from Japan are going back up again, not nearly where they were before, but they are. The number of American students studying in Japan, it lags, the data there lags a year. So we're really looking at COVID there because we count students who study abroad only after they come back, get credit for what their work, and that's how we count them because we can't count them in Japan. We only can count them when they come back. So that number looks pretty sad, but is going back up again. And we expect next year, Open Doors, which will report on the 21-22 data, should look a lot better. And we're happy. Our website has tons of information, more detailed. It also has information about Japanese who come here just for intensive English, and those numbers have always been very important in the exchange process. So basically, I consider this a good news sheet. So welcome everybody, and welcome to Explore. If you have any questions about Open Doors, I'll try to answer, or better yet, I'll refer you to our people who are the experts in our Open Doors team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan and Peggy, for that update. And that is encouraging information. I know all of us, I was in Japan recently in June, and it was interesting to just see the number of travelers to Japan. And many of us, and the number of people who I met from the Washington, D.C. area, because many of us had not been able to travel. So COVID had such an impact, not only on student mobility, and I remember Tim and others at the department were very busy trying to bring people home. Colleges, universities were trying to, figure out what would be possible for their students. And then when Japan closed its border, this community actually did respond and say, we've worked really hard for a number of years to get our numbers of American students going to Japan up. Their student interest and now scholarship study about Japan and students studying Japanese language are not able to travel. And so I'm delighted that the doors are open. People are now traveling, wearing my commission hat. The Japan-U.S. Friendship Commission is a grant-making agency, and a number of you around the table as recipients do people-to-people exchange, and those exchanges couldn't happen. And so there has been a backlog of participation and engagement in activity. So I know, some of the people on the screen and some of the people in the room are finally catching up. And so I'm glad to know that you're expecting better numbers going forward, to be sure. So I asked one of the questions in the document that we circulated about the not only activities that you all are involved in, but also the impact of COVID. And, you know, we're already hearing and we know part of the impact was that we had a slowdown, if you will, if not a pause, you know, of mobility. But it sounds like now some of you are getting back on your feet. We also had a disruption of the workspace and the work style. And this meeting is an example of maybe one of the silver linings in terms of an outcome. Traditionally, when we held this meeting, it was only available to people who were in Washington, D.C., or who could travel from a nearby city, or, you know, if they were willing to hop on a train. But now we've learned how to do hybrid. And so this is a meeting where we're still getting used to it. I'm looking one way and I'm turning to the screen and looking another. But I hope those of you online can feel as though you're part of the conversation. And you might not be able to discern who each one of our faces are. You know that we're here and we are still one community in conversation together. And I know what we found at the commission and through CULCON, and we're having our meetings virtually also, is that while it's not a substitute for being in person, it allows us to stay connected and to continue the lines of communication. There's also an equity and accessibility factor in that people who might not have had the resources, financial resources to travel or to participate are able now to be able to do that. And so I guess if there are any highlights, you know, if people one of the questions is it less expensive and therefore it's something we should continue to do? Or is it something that should be offered as an option for the circumstances, you know, that we're finding ourselves faced with now? So just thoughts on or best practices and lessons learned, I mean, or conclusions. I mean, each of you sort of have already written, and I've seen a number of you are doing and finding not only hybrid work, but also hybrid programming. And some of you are completely doing in-person only programming. But I know from the commission's perspective, cost was a huge factor. And so while there's an investment that's required for virtual work, at least it's permanent and you can use it or leverage it and take advantage of it. But I'm just wondering, do we see hybrid and online as our future and our new reality, or is it something we're happy to part with and get back to moving people?
Was there anything before hybrid? It seems so part of life.
Yeah, is that Shanti? You're going to have to project, or you can move closer.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
Great.
wonderful. Shanti Shoji from CULCON, USA. For us, we were very much a I would almost say technological organization. Before COVID, there was no remote work, there was no Teams, there was no SharePoint, there was no cloud documents. So it's really helped us propel into now, you know, like everyone else. We use Teams, we use Zoom, we use SharePoint. You can do work if you're traveling, if you're in Japan, you know, you can still continue that work. One silver lining, as I think you know you've noted, is that you know we can bring those who are not in the community, these speakers from Japan, for us, which is, you know, it brings their voices to those in the community here. So I think it allows further engagement with those who were not accessible before. I think also accessibility can be addressed because, you know, those who are perhaps virtual on that day or whatnot could be better for them. Also, I think for just you know, working families, it allows for ease of access so that everyone has information. But I don't think that it's one or the other. I think it will always be both. We will always have hybrid. Hybrid is challenging at times. They can't hear us sometimes. They can't see all of us. But it's better than not being here. And those who can still gather in person. So I see it as, it'll always be here, but it has brought some good things.
Thank you. Yeah, I've noticed that when participants have had a past experience with each other, it seems easier to jump into the hybrid conversation. There's a certain amount of knowledge and understanding already, so it doesn't take as long to build that rapport, but you may need to take some time to develop all of that. And so taking into consideration, people's comfort level, that could be an issue. I see Bahia and I see, is that Sally?
Sally, yes.
Okay, all right. So, and then is there someone?
Trevor.
And Trevor. Okay, so that's the lineup.
Okay.
Bahia.
Hi, I'm Bahia Simons-Lang with International Student Conferences. For those of you who don't know, we facilitate conferences that are run by university students, and our largest and longest lasting one is the Japan American Student Conference, going on since 1934. During COVID, we had to shift totally online for these conferences, which you're still able to put on, I think, high quality programs, but there certainly is no substitute for now being back in person. Our Japan conference was back in person last summer in the US and this summer in Japan. Right now, actually, I go there tomorrow. But one thing I have noticed since COVID and even coming back in person is that our university student organizers are incorporating virtual in a way that they did not before. So they're utilizing things like Zoom as a way to bring in speakers that are not physically located where the conference is being held, but that can speak relevantly on one of their roundtable topics or the theme of the conference. The other thing I've noticed is they've been utilizing virtual for some new programming, including a youth forum that invites high school and university students located anywhere to join and have a lecture and then small group discussions with our Japan conference participants. So I think virtual has brought a lot, and I think we will continue to see hybrid programming, and I think we should take advantage of that. But I also see having the conferences back in person, that there's no substitute for actually having the students be able to interact in person with each other and also with speakers, professionals, academics that they normally wouldn't have access to.
Thank you for that. Sally?
Hi, everyone. Sayuri Romain from the Mansfield Foundation. I'm here with my colleagues over here, Nathan Finch, Amelia Hecht, and Peter Goodman. So I want to say that I agree with what everyone said so far. COVID has definitely impacted our programming. Like Bahia said, we had to pause completely and go online. And that adjustment was a little bit of a difficulty at first, but I think we're much better at it. And it is true, I agree with Bahia, we can have more access to different speakers from around the world, and it seems really easier to incorporate different participants. And something I've noticed that really worked for us is a hybrid programming in the sense that we have a couple or 3 virtual meetings with the working group before having an in-person, before having the capstone meeting in person somewhere. And that really helps with the mindset and everyone waiting, expecting that in-person meeting at the end. It's kind of a payoff. So I think I saw more interactions, more engagement during virtual sessions because they had this promise of being in person at the end of the programming. So I think it really builds up the camaraderie in anticipation of the in-person programming. And something I want to warn about is that it definitely made things easier, and now I think we will be continuing to incorporate hybrid programming. But the flip side is that for all of us, directors and program officers, it feels like we're always on, and it feels like we always have to be on email or on Zoom, and that can create a little bit of stress and that can create some mental health issues. So I just wanted to raise that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's an interesting observation. I don't know about all of you, but I felt like particularly during the lockdown when we were all in our home offices or whatever the environment, the day was so packed. I mean, you had to build in maybe a 10-minute break in between Zoom calls and meetings and events. So it was great to be able to stay engaged and to participate in meetings and get good information. It was only, and because we deal with a country that's on the other side of the world in a different time zone, it can feel as though you're in a 24-hour-a-day job if you're not careful. We've got two CULCON panelists online who both voiced a preference for in-person engagement. But on the other hand, this is an opportunity to bring people together. I'm wondering if you wanted to embellish or add on that. And Trevor, if I may, maybe just put you on the spot a little bit, wearing your hat as a librarian. And one of the consequences of COVID, particularly when students were not able to be physically on campus and scholars, was that the research that they might have wanted to conduct, the materials and the information wasn't available. And so one of the reasons why, you know, CULCON is focusing on this issue of information and access and information sharing is because we know that people around the world, you know, are going to, may not be able to travel, may want to have access to information so that we can make sure both of our missions are being carried out by information sharing. So Trevor, I just want, from where you sit, do you have anything to add in this
so thank you. Thank you. I think our colleagues in the room have expressed a lot of the advantages of both being in person and also having the hybrid option, as some of our online colleagues have also shared. I think the only other thing I would add, though, is you know, I have been spending a lot of time thinking about sustainability, and you know, Cynthia mentioned traveling for her across the country for a half-day meeting. For me, it's just a train ride, certainly a little more sustainable than a plane ride. But you know, having this, although there are different aspects of sustainability with electricity, et cetera, but I think having the hybrid option is also a more sustainable one for all of our organizations, allowing this type of participation.
Thank you, Trevor. And I have a question for the group, but Cynthia, do you have a thought or a comment on this?
I do have a thought and a comment. I think one of the things we have learned from these critical engagements like this is the intentionality in the design of the content that's being presented and how we show up to each other. So it is more of a challenge when we don't all know each other. And so I think that's one of the elements that we have to think about, how we create community for those of us who aren't working together, so that the hybrid options become a little bit, what's the word, organic in terms of how we're communicating. So of course, Paige, I know you, I recognize your voice. I feel, you know, confident talking with you, but for others, I'm not going to continue to repeat, we can't hear you. So there are some of those elements about the intentionality and how we design this sort of engagement for the maximum effectiveness. So that's what I would say. However, so I think that's one element that we've learned just in all of our meetings. The other is absolutely it is effective and allows us an opportunity to engage when and hear when we might not otherwise be able to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I think it's also interesting. I'm mindful we have CULCON meetings with our Japanese counterparts, some of whom we know and some of whom are new to us, but we also recognize it's the difference of the time of day. And so you also have to think, how long are you asking somebody to be in a meeting? So we on the US side might meet, we alternate, but if we meet in the evening, it's 9 o'clock at night, and I dare not, I mean, Bill is incredibly wonderful and patient, but I don't think I can really in good conscience ask him to be on a call until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So we have to think about not just the hour of the day, but how much do we try to fit in to the time that we have, knowing that people are incredibly busy and also are human beings that have the need for sleep and other things. So there's that. I am wondering, and I want to not lose track of some of the opportunity to talk about equity issues as well. But before raising that question, many of our organizations have shared missions. We all have a common focus on strengthening the U.S. Japan partnership, and we do that in a variety of ways. When we do programs that are offered virtually, I'm wondering if it allows for more collaboration. So, for example, when we're designing a legislative exchange program, or we're designing a student exchange, it's typically for a particular targeted group of people, and they're going on a date that's mutually agreeable for everybody, and the organizer is the institution, and they plan it, they have speakers. But when we offer a virtual meeting such as this, I'm wondering, is there more opportunity for like-minded institutions to partner and to collaborate together? And I know sometimes it does happen. Sometimes U.S JAA might partner with the U.S. Japan Bridging Foundation. Tom has done that when Bahia was in that role that Jessica now sits. So I'm wondering if we could or should think more about collaboration when it comes to, because then we're not hopping around from meeting to meeting. U.S JAA's got a meeting, and then in 2 hours, it's going to be JCIE, and then, later this evening, it's going to be Mansfield Foundation. I can maybe take advantage of the content offered by each if we collaboratively think about what we want to offer. Thoughts about that? Or maybe something to think about. Maybe.
That's all wonderful.
Oh, so you have to
sorry.
project.
I'm not good at this projecting thing.
Mindy says it's a wonderful idea.
But the thought is, how do you facilitate that?
Right.
Like, how do we know with each other's programs?
Mhm.
And there's some organizations here that exclude some of the people around this from going to their programs. So how can you transmit, which unfortunately the word is you.
Yeah. Well, and that's CULCON's role. We are an honest broker. So
how can you say so-and-so and so-and-so are having a program on, I don't know, tea. And,
Right.
and oh, you're having a program on tea. Why don't we tea together?
Mhm.
Or you're having this wonderful new book that just came out on, there's all sorts of
Right. Yeah.
why can't they need to know,
Right.
like to be
That's
sure,
fair.
my newsletter tries to capture as many organizations events as possible, but you can be the early warning. Like someone can say, we're planning in the next 6 months something on tea, and then someone else can say, oh, tea.
Right.
There's
Well, and
actually an
that's
interesting book on
you make a great point, and that's one of the reasons why we initiated this publication, which is available digitally, because we're thinking about the environment, but also it can be organic and it can be updated. And it's on CULCON's website. So we hopefully now know what your organizations are working on, ideas that you may have for the future, new initiatives, challenges that you may be facing. Some of you sort of shared that in here as well, which is incredibly useful. And I'll also offer what CULCON did for a subset of an issue on legislative exchanges. There are at least 3, maybe 4 or more organizations that organize legislative exchanges for congressional staff and for members of Congress. Well, for us institutionally, we know the difference. But when you're asking a speaker or a member of Congress to meet with the group, it's all Japan to them. What's the difference? And when we want to invite them to a reception, it's like, oh, you want me to go to a reception 3 different days of the week because they're hosted by 3 different institutions. So we got smart and decided to meet along with the representative from the Japanese embassy and say, Golden Week is coming. We know there are going to be a lot of visitors from Japan. Can we have one event to welcome them? And can we ask a representative of the organization to either offer some remarks or have a member speak. And that way, Diana DeGed and, French Hill and others don't have to pick and choose. Their schedulers are happier. We all benefit from their participation, and it's good collaboration and cooperation. So I would say, those of you who have similar missions, if you are thinking about doing things in a hybrid way, all of us are working with limited budgets and limited staff capacity. So, we've talked about this before. Jake's, and I want to make sure I introduce Jake Schlesinger to the whole group. He is the new head of the U.S. Japan Foundation. And so I'm grateful that he's here, because the commission is a grant-making agency with a limited budget, and U.S. Japan Foundation is a grant-making institution which is thinking about what its priorities will be going forward. And so, I think it's good for you to meet the people in the room, but also, hear some of these challenges, because we all have limited pools of money and staff to make magic happen. So before moving on to the subnational diplomacy topic, I don't want to, Tim's got a thought.
Well, I just had a quick thought, and not to volunteer Pamela's time, she's gonna kick me under the table, or someone on your team, but I thought, and my colleague Allison knows that EAP does, we have something that's more about weekly activities that happen, a little different than with this audience, but for Fulbright, we gather like quarterly, what are all the activities, what are the one sentence on that events or activities for our Fulbright commissions in EAP. So an idea, again, not sure how time consuming it would be, so looking at me, but if quarterly, if you had a deadline for organizations to, a one-liner and even the link to public events or things that people could participate in, and then there was 4 times a year, a collective list, or twice a year, whatever that is, people would be informed about it if they were interested in participating, or even to the extent of a collaboration, they could follow up. Because you're right, I hear it sometimes, like I can't track everything, but the events that you do, it'd be good to know, because I don't have time to go to your website and look when I think about you. But if I had a one pager on different activities, the key things that you're interested in, people want to know about and participating. And so it's just an idea, and I'll work with you.
All right, that sounds fair. So before we turn to subnational diplomacy, I do want to just highlight the fact that it's really impressive to see and encouraging to know the myriad ways that people are sort of like raising awareness about issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Many of your organizations, some since 2017 and maybe before even, were thinking about diversity, but we know in our community, sometimes it was focused more on gender, or making sure that we had geographic representation, and diversity of subject matter for CULCON is very important also, because the work that we do focuses on people-to-people exchange, and the U.S. Japan partnership covers a myriad of issues. And so we want to make sure that we cover a number of topics as well, but thinking about also who has access to the opportunities to be engaged is really important. And so after the racial reckoning and also instances of Asian hate and other issues that just happened, it seemed to be amplified during COVID, it was interesting to see in the past 3 years the ways that institutions have responded. Everything from allyship and statements of support to new initiatives that resulted in bringing in new leadership in organizations, new voices in panel discussions and events, and new scholarship opportunities. So it really is interesting to see. So I do encourage you to read the updates. Again, I'm proud that the commission recently launched an initiative trying to diversify the pipeline. We've always been thinking about the pipeline because I love my work, but I will not be doing it forever. And I suspect that may be the case for some of you on screen and in the room. I'm not speaking for you. I'm just recognizing the realities of things. And so we need to know that there are people with knowledge about Japan, Japanese language fluency, expertise on U.S. Japan relations, English language fluency, who are equipped and confident to be able to do the important work that lies ahead. When Alan was talking about the number of refugees and all of, the world is changing and the issues are different from when I may have initially become interested in Japan. And so we have to make sure, that we're current and we're finding students in all different types of institutions. So community colleges are more engaged. Historically, we've had colleges and universities are more prominently featured, public and private institutions. And so I know, having read from Tom, that the Bridging Foundation has increased its outreach, which is impressive. So not only are we sending more students to Japan, but we're also showing the diversity of the United States through these people who are participating. So I don't know if anybody had any other sort of point to share or best practice before we talk about subnational diplomacy, but I did want to highlight that important work that's happening. Anyone on screen? I say screen because you're on my screen. But, yeah. All right, then I'm going to turn to another topic and invite our CULCON panelist, Dr. Bill Tsutsui, whose bio you have. It's interesting, I was introducing him to somebody earlier, his university role and, leadership role at CULCON, and I won't call you out, but it was like, oh, are you the Godzilla guy? Also known as the specialist on Godzilla. But Bill is co-chair of our working group on subnational diplomacy. And we're appreciative of your leadership in that space. So I'm going to turn the mic and toss it over to you, or the imaginary mic.
Imaginary mic. Well, thanks so much, Paige. Good morning, everyone. What a pleasure it is to be here with you. Thanks as well to IIE for hosting us in this wonderful space. Thanks for everyone for being here in person and online, including the other members of CULCON and members of the working group that I'll be talking about with you all today. I also want to thank everyone here and the organizations that you represent for the work that you all do on a daily basis to manage, strengthen, enrich, and deepen the U.S.-Japan relationship. I am constantly impressed and surprised by the creativity and commitment of the diverse and dynamic ecosystem of organizations, large and small, public and private, creating and sustaining bridges across the Pacific. And this is really a testament, I think, to that energy we have in this community. And so I just want you to be aware how much appreciation there is for the fact that the ongoing vitality in the U.S.-Japan alliance is due in very large part to your passion and to your collective work, as well, of course, as the impact of Otani Shohei and KonMari and Godzilla. So it's an honor to spend some time with you today. And I promise I'm not just going to talk with you all afternoon. Now, as Paige mentioned, I'm here as the co-chair of one of two CULCON working groups currently focused on key aspects of the cultural and educational foundations of the U.S.-Japan relationship. This working group is exploring subnational diplomacy and local and regional exchange, while the other, co-chaired by Trevor Dawes, is considering information access and sharing in the digital age. These groups, made up of U.S. and Japan CULCON members, as well as additional outside experts, are tasked with, I quote, identifying problems and searching for feasible projects with the goal of recommending policies to the Japanese Prime Minister and the U.S. President, as well as nurturing the next generation of leaders in the U.S.-Japan alliance. Now, I would just note, I'm sure everyone here knows what CULCON does, and Paige and Pamela can correct me if I'm wrong on this. But CULCON's role is to identify issues of significance in the cultural and educational dimensions of the U.S.-Japan relationship, study them, make recommendations to address them, and encourage action by the respective governments and other organizations engaged in that relationship. So CULCON, in other words, does not have resources itself to address needs and priorities in strengthening U.S.-Japan relations, but it does have the ability to convene key actors, as is taking place today, and does have a soapbox that it can step up on to draw attention to critical topics and urge the changes necessary to deepen cultural, educational, intellectual, and people-to-people ties between our two countries. So the Subnational Diplomacy Working Group has been active since the spring of this year in exploring the role of subnational diplomacy and regional and local exchange on the U.S.-Japan partnership, as well as investigating ways to enhance this interaction. In other words, we have been discussing and researching how best to stimulate the activities and enhance the impact of public and private partnerships and organizations contributing to the strength of the U.S.-Japan relationship at the level of cities, states and prefectures, and regions. So how can we support, sustain, grow, and leverage the successes of things like sister city relationships, Japan-America societies, university-sponsored institutional partnerships, consulates and honorary consuls, and a variety of forms of exchange programs, from those involving youth in sports to those bringing city officials together to work on recycling and sustainability projects. Our working group members bring to our discussions long experience and deep knowledge of a number of key aspects of U.S.-Japan subnational diplomacy. From the Japan side, the group's members include the actor Koyamada Shin, who has established the Japan-U.S. Sister Cities Association, which aims to bring together Japanese municipalities with sister city relationships to network, share best practices, and generate financial support. Kitano Mitsuru, Executive Advisor for the Council of Local Authorities for International Relations, CLARE, an active government-affiliated foundation that works to support the internationalization efforts of local authorities in Japan, and the working group's Japan co-chair, Dr. Sato Yuri, who's Executive Vice President of the Japan Foundation, who oversees Japan studies and overseas partnerships. From the U.S. side, we have Peter Kelly, who I think many of you here know is the former president of the National Association of Japan-America Societies, tremendous knowledge of that space. President Matson from San Jose State University, who is working very hard to nurture relationships among Japanese studies, Asian American studies, and local communities in California. And Dr. Mary Alice Haddad, who's also on the call from Wesleyan University, who is doing some amazing research on the economic benefits that accrue to American cities that are active in subnational diplomacy. So sister city relationships, hosting consulates, having an Office of International Affairs, and so forth. And I hope later on we get to discussion that Mary Alice will chime in a little bit about the research she's doing. And in addition to that, I noticed that y'all shared lots of information about subnational diplomacy in your reporting. We'll also send out a form from Professor Haddad asking for additional input because she is collecting examples of subnational diplomacy projects to churn to see what empirical outputs she can get. So over our 2 meetings so far, the working group has begun to get a sense of the tremendous amount of activity taking place at the subnational level on both sides of the Pacific, much of it due to involvement of people here at this summit, of some of the promising new initiatives underway, of some of the challenges facing organizations like Japan-America societies and partnerships like Sister Cities, of the many opportunities out there to make connections, share exemplary practices, and deepen ties, and of the critical needs both for the near term and the longer term future of organizations working on the U.S.-Japan relationship at the local and regional level. So the working group is now moving towards drafting a preliminary report, which will be done this fall, with a full report with recommendations in 2 years. Is that right? Okay. So we still have time to talk and think, which is good.
And collect.
So today, with many thanks to Paige for giving me some time with you all, I am coming to you on behalf of the working group to solicit your feedback and to hear from you. I know I've been talking a lot for someone who's here to listen, but that's what I'm here to do. So what's working in subnational diplomacy between the United States and Japan? What isn't? What would you really like to be able to do, but have been unable to? What is standing in the way of growth and progress and innovation? And what can CULCON do to help strengthen the wide range of organizations across American cities, states, and regions contributing to cultural and educational understanding and exchange with Japan? So I'm going to shut up. I would love to hear from you, though, about success stories, about initiatives in progress that you expect to have a significant impact, about dreams of what could happen in this subnational space. I also want to hear, though, about challenges, about barriers, about frustrations, and about worries for the future. I think we can almost all agree, probably all of us can agree, that more funding would solve a lot of problems for everybody. But other than a magic ATM that shoots out yen and dollars, what issues do we collectively need to tackle to really move the needle in U.S. Japan subnational diplomacy? I'm all ears. How's you?
My name is Kazuo from the Center for. I envy your projectability. My name is Kazuo from Japan Center for International Exchange USA. I'm based in Washington, D.C., but our office is headquartered in New York with many colleagues in Japan as well. I think I can answer a couple of your questions, but just as an introduction, JCIE has always valued exchanges outside of New York, DC, and Silicon Valley. And so we have nurtured local government, political leaders to learn about Japan. We just launched last year a program, community level program on aging issues, where locals from Ohio, I think where an AJAS conference is taking place this fall, will visit Japan to share lessons learned and best practices about community level support for healthy and active aging. So, and that has worked really well because communities play a large role in the shared challenges of aging in our two countries. I don't have answers to all your questions, but one thought I had, and I have a question as well. One is diet members. So when Japanese diet members come to the US, this has been addressed for many years, but still they only come to Washington. Can they go outside of Washington when they come here during Golden Week? So that's one challenge I've seen. So that's the challenge. The question I had is, and maybe a solution to enlarging your efforts is, I have learned that the State Department has an office for subnational diplomacy that was opened up. I wonder, and my understanding is it was sort of driven by actually more security concerns of foreign influence in various regions of the states. So maybe the incentives are slightly different, but I wonder if there's alignment in the things that they're trying to do, and therefore whether you have any partnership proposals in your report. And so that's a question and also a suggestion.
Thank you, Kazuo. And Bill, if I may, CULCON's meeting as its plenary this coming October, and many thanks for Yoshi, who's on the call from the Japan American Society Atlanta. They're helping to host us, and we've informed Ambassador Hachichian about this topic and this upcoming meeting. And so whether she'll be able to join us in Atlanta or not, I don't know, but we're definitely hoping to partner, at least in share information and introduce this community's work to the work that she and her staff team are doing. So we're in the beginning of getting to know each other, I guess.
Andy?
Sorry. I guess I have more of a question, which maybe is an observation. One of the problems, and one of the actually, it can be defined as an assault on American values, the severing of sister city relations between San Francisco and Osaka. How are you going to be reporting on that? Are you going to try to figure out how to solve that? Are you going to try to educate the governor of Osaka that his views are troglodyte, dinosaur, pick a creature? How? Because that has been severed and there's been no effort to solve it, though the governor did try to talk to Ambassador Emanuel about it. And the worst part is that his notions have been rewarded by the central government many, many times by having the expo, by having all ironies, the G20 women's conference in Osaka. Really quite amazing. So
For that reminder, yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's probably not in our remit to look at a specific case like that. And yet clearly, something I think that is on the mind of CULCON is political divides and a sort of lack of understanding between the United States and Japan on certain political divides and how we can begin to address that. Yeah.
you wonder if that kind of strong arm tactic is going to be used again.
Around, just making sure we're not overlooking anyone. Oh, Jessica.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Hi, this is Jessica. I'm following Bahia's footsteps and am the executive director for U.S JAA. And our view on subnational diplomacy is much more on the grassroots level with the people that we work with. And I've noticed that people have become really taxed by COVID, and they're sort of relearning their way around the block. And this is especially true for entry-level professionals and subnational diplomacy work, where it often rests on grassroots and volunteer resources. And so I found that asking them for heavy lifts is challenging sort of during this psychological recovery period. And creating easily executed programs and templates for subnational diplomacy projects seems to be more ideal, giving people a structure to work within, and then they can execute it. That's been something that I've noticed has been a benefit.
Yeah. Pedro.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Pedro Martin from the State Department, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, Global Leaders Division. We are a proud supporter of CULCON, and also happen to provide administrative grant support to the Sister Cities International Organization as well. So this is a topic that is somewhat familiar to us. I won't speak directly to the question regarding the Office of Subnational Diplomacy within the State Department. That's a bit outside of our lane. However, in terms of our experience in reviewing opportunities and challenges with subnational diplomacy in our own work, what we have identified as one of the challenges with subnational diplomacy is that the interests are very different than what you see at the national level and the national government to government relationships. They tend to be more specific, and they tend to be much more transactional. So I think as we continue to look at opportunities in identifying cities or counties or other forms of subnational diplomacy, looking at where those interests match up and make it for a more fruitful relationship and opportunity there. The other area where we see a tremendous amount of opportunity is how we can leverage subnational diplomacy in dealing with or addressing regional or global issues, especially in places like Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, where you're dealing with smaller countries, much less capacity, who are much have a similar makeup to what we would consider large cities in the US and in Japan, rather than at the national level. And we see this, a lot of this has come out of the feedback from participants of our professional fellows programs and other exchanges, where you listen to a lot of the challenges that these young professionals face in the work that they're doing, either through local governments or in their communities. And much of it relates much more directly to the types of challenges that you see at the city or county level in the United States, rather than how we can manage those issues at the national level. So how can the US and Japan leverage subnational diplomacy together in collaboration to address some of these issues in smaller countries that have less capacity is something that we're looking to improve on as well. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
If I could.
Yeah.
It's a hard, I think you have a hard task.
Thank you for that.
And I think all of us can remember a time when there were more Japanese students here, more visits from Diet members that went outside of the Washington bubble, more Americans going to Japan. We're not in that environment anymore. I think it's important to acknowledge that the world for both of our countries has shifted. In the education field, I know as a university president, you would have sensed it too. Our young people don't have passports.
Yeah.
They don't study abroad anywhere near as much as we. And the population of both of our countries is turning inward, insular, more nationalistic. And some acknowledgement of that is important, because you can't, the subcommittee, the report, the recommendations can't solve these longer term, deeper societal problems. And I'm very worried about it. I think we all should be worried about how inward turning our youth is, and how inward turning Japanese youth are, and how easy it is to turn inward. And I wouldn't want all of that to fall on the committee's shoulders.
We'll solve that, no problem. Yes, Sally.
Yes, I'm Sally Schwartz with an organization called Globalize DC. And our focus is very narrowly on the K-12 world in Washington, DC, and helping to build that pipeline. And since most of our public school students are Black and brown, our work is very much around diversifying the pipeline. So I have two very well, one is a general statement based on my experience. And understanding DC is a unique city, but a lot of the work we do is to try to connect our local students with the international city that is around them, from which they are very disconnected. And we deal with our city government and our education leadership. There is a real bifurcation between the people that are in city government, that do exchanges, that do sister cities, and people that are in the education leadership. And I would urge any kind of work at the state and city levels to include the education sector. And this sort of addresses your point too, I think, that we always need to be mindful of the students that are pre-university, because if we don't get them at the K-12 space, we lose most of them. The other is, I was waiting for someone else to mention this, but for me, the pipeline of Japanese teachers, the real difficulty in finding teachers of Japanese, in my experience, is a huge problem. And that really plays out at the local level, where school districts are trying to find teachers, or at the state level. So we're doing work to try to go around that, try to solve that. But having sort of a national work with the state, there are solutions that I think we can sort of come up with. So I think that's really important in terms of, again, developing that pipeline.
So Can I just, on that last topic, I know we've got Susan Schmidt, who is here, and we just met from Arlington? Yeah, oh, there you are. So I guess, we have a local experience, of what Arlington has done to make sure that Japanese, is still available, and to broaden that. And Susan Schmidt, who is president of AATJ. I'm wondering, Susan, can you just tell us what the status is now in terms of Japanese language instruction in the US, if you have that? It was interesting. I know some years ago when CULCON was looking at this issue, we were worrying about the retirements of a number of instructors, and some people waiting to retire because they were just afraid that the program would dissolve. And I know in Arlington that was threatened and the community rallied, and that's a wonderful best practice of what is possible. But Susan, can you speak to the issue and Sally's comment?
Yeah, it's still an issue. It's an issue in many places, and it's really a struggle on both national and many local levels to fill open teaching positions. The overall state of Japanese language education is very healthy. There's undiminished interest in studying Japanese at all levels, but there are programs that are threatened, mostly at the K through 12 level, also at the college level. More recently, there's been something in the news from West Virginia that Japanese is not alone, but foreign language programs are being threatened. But the teacher pipeline is something that everyone is trying to address and worried about. It's really tough. There are some success stories. Programs that were threatened with closure have been saved in several communities in Wisconsin, in Maine, in Virginia, in some other places, mostly by getting the communities involved. Our organizations always do what we can to get involved in places where programs are threatened, but it's always the local communities stepping up that succeed in saving threatened programs. There are several organizations, educational institutions that are trying to set up new programs to train. There are programs that trying to train new teachers for positions, but it's kind of a long process. And some of these programs, which are training teachers from Japan to work in U.S. colleges and high schools, have the issue that they're able to place people in schools for a couple of years, and then they have to leave because of visa issues. And that's something that is continuing to be a problem. So yeah, I can just echo that it is still a problem that's being struggled with by people in many places at many levels.
And Susan, thank you. Before we let you go, and I do want to hear from Yoshimi, what about the idea or the notion of Jet alum or other people that have had Americans who have substantial proficiency in Japanese as gaining a credential? I thought there was a point at which maybe the Japan Foundation was working or looking into or exploring that opportunity.
The Japan Foundation, maybe. There are a couple of programs. There's one at Middlebury College to provide special training and certification for JET alums who are interested in becoming Japanese teachers. In the past, it was a lot of the people who have been teaching in high schools are JET alums. It was a more popular option a few years ago, I think, than now, but we really probably need to work harder on outreach to that particular group. So Jessica will be speaking with you.
All right, thank you, Susan. And I would like Yoshimi, if you are comfortable, just giving us a little bit of an update of your, in fact, it was a Jet alum who was previously involved in not spearheading alone, but working on this initiative, I know. So you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. First time here. I'm so glad to join sort of like-minded people here. My name is Yoshimi Muto, and I represent Study Japanese in Arlington, and Arlington across the river from here. And we got organized in 2018 when Arlington Public Schools, who had 3 high schools teaching Japanese program, decided that they're gonna check the program together with also some other program like the German was also targeted. And in that decision, I guess the students who were studying at the high school back then, as well as the parents and also Japanese local communities living in Arlington area. And then there is a Japanese school in Maryland, which has like 700 sort of like the heritage kids studying Japanese there. So those parents came together basically to say, support these high school students who wanted to continue studying Japanese. So we went and organized, basically we trained the students themselves to petition the Board of Education, basically to go there, make a case, and then try to save it. And then that made a very, very good impression, I think, to the Board of Education members. And then it was decided that, okay, we will keep going. Back then at the time, enrollment of the 3 high schools was 50 students from Japanese 1, 2, and 3, I guess. And last year, this just immediate past academic year, our enrollment for the Japanese program was 150. But that was a great achievement, not by SJA, but we were trying to basically cultivate the kids' interest in Japanese language as well as Japanese culture. So that's how the SJA Study Japanese in Arlington was originally named as Save Japanese in Arlington. Was the original name for this NPO. Interestingly, Germany was actually not able to sustain it, so they got chucked. And now we're facing a little bit of a crisis again, because although we had 150 students, and then we were able to hire additional Japanese teacher, but as you know, Japanese is not so easy to learn from high school. We don't have a middle school program or elementary school program in a public school system. So when they go, enthusiastically, I want to be able to read manga in Japanese, kind of high school students, they don't really progress that fast. And then, so in the current APS, Arlington Public School system, we only have level 1 to 3. There's no 4 or AP level because there's not enough time to get there. So we were trying to organize and sort of lobby the Board of Education in Arlington County to say, look, we need to get middle school, start teaching Japanese there and so forth. We're not there yet. And right now, from what I understand from the Japanese teachers there, is that not all of the students who are at the level 1 is going to be able to level 2 and then 2 to 3. So we are sort of anticipating a dip in the enrollment this coming year. So it's a sort of like a cyclical issue and a structural issue, I think.
Well, thank you for that inspiring story. Thank you all for this wonderful feedback and conversation. There are a couple especially honored guests we have with us today. I'd like to recognize and also ask if they have any comments for the group. One is Mr. Kaneshiro from the Embassy of Japan here in Washington. And the other is my old friend Cheryl Gibbs from Department of Education. How are you, Cheryl?
Oh, it's so good to see you. Like knew Bill when he was the acting director of the East Asian program at the University of Kansas, which is a
Whole
standout.
different life ago.
A whole different life ago. Yes. But I do want to say a couple of words on behalf of the institutions that the U.S. Department of Education supports under their National Resource Centers programs in foreign language and area studies fellowships. We support 22 institutions who offer expertise on East Asia with a focus, obviously, of Japan. And during the pandemic, they had some challenges, but they rose to the occasion, and instruction on area studies courses on Japan and language training programs did not suffer because they were able to pivot and to make sure that students did not lose any ground in learning Japanese to the advanced levels and to offer the courses for area studies training. So we at the department, obviously, we wish we had more money as well, but we are doing great things through these institutions and their programming and their outreach, and memorandum of understandings are continually being developed with these institutions. And so we are very proud of the work that they are doing. There was a drop off of enrollments, of course, or opportunities to study in Japan, as you all have noted, but they're building back now with the class fellowships and being able to send students to Japan. So it's really good to see you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah. Kaneshiro-san?
Oh, I'm going to ask you to move a little closer because I want to make sure our friends online can hear you. So can you just come a little closer? The microphone is up here. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Perhaps he takes my seat.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you can just be brief. I just want you to be heard.
It's your fastest route to becoming president.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but it's easier to hear from there.
Hi everyone.
No,
My name is Taichi Kaneshiro from Embassy of Japan, and I'm in charge of education. So the topic you are discussing is very familiar with me. And I'd like to thank all of you for your continued efforts for promoting to pass-to-pass exchange. And I just tell you the updated news from Embassy. And the Embassy recently successfully sent out JET program participants early August. And the pre-departure orientation, the day before the departure, was held in person for the first time in 4 years. And Paige was wonderful, made a keynote speech. Thank you so much. And we are really thinking to connect the former JET participants or mixed governmental scholarship fellows and Mansfield fellows and Fulbrighters. So I'm now planning to host a barbecue party at the ambassador's residence and coming next month. So we're thinking to reconnect and find them for the first time. So maybe I can buy some of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did you study in America at any point?
Actually, I'm studying now. Graduate school.
Which one?
Okay, great. So my study is never ending. Yeah.
Yeah, I will. You know, I think that what's been great about this conversation, it shows the diversity of connections that are taking place at the subnational level between the United States and Japan. It shows the diversity of motivations, diversity of strategies for addressing the relationships, and the diversity of challenges that go from the cosmic, of ills facing our society as a whole to very specific ones in communities. Let's not end the conversation here. We want to hear from you. If there are other ideas you have or issues you think we should address, please let us know. And the best way is through Pamela and Paige. to funnel that information to the working group. And we look forward to other opportunities to grow this conversation even beyond this group in the coming couple of years. Thank you so much.
Bill, thank you so much for joining us in person and giving us this opportunity to share what CULCON is doing. And for all of you who joined online and in person, it's great to see you. I hope those of you online have wonderful lunch plans. I'm sorry, we can't offer you a wonderful boxed lunch, but I'm so delighted that this technology and IIE's hospitality has made it possible. So I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day. And for those of you who are joining us in person for lunch and networking, behind you, there are a variety of lunchbox options, and make yourself comfortable around the table, meet people who you haven't seen in a while or who you've never met before, and let's continue the discussion. And thank you to my colleague, Pamela, yes, for organizing everything that we've experienced today, in addition to all the other things that are going on. Thank you, Pamela. Yes, somebody was commenting on something online.
I did. Paige and Pamela, I hope that you'll be able to share some of the chat comments that were made throughout the discussion with the rest of the group, because there was engagement during different intervals of the conversation that I don't think got shared. So I hope some of that will be captured, and it's one of the things to remember when we have two forms of dialogue going on, that somebody is monitoring and contributing some of the chat dialogue. But thank you very much for a wonderful conversation and a great morning.
Thank you, Cynthia. It's an opportunity to say the meeting has been recorded, and so we will be able to share the entire meeting with all of you. And there was a robust conversation going on. I'm just not skillful enough at being able to have my tennis head going back and forth and read all at the same time. But thank you all for your active engagement, both in person, virtually, and through the chat. Thank you.